The emergency beacon pulsed through the darkness of space, its desperate signal carrying across the void like a cry for help that no one seemed to hear. Captain Zarathul pressed her three-fingered hand against the cold metal console, watching the communications display with growing despair. The Kethmoran research vessel, Silent Tide, had been adrift for 6 cycles now, their main engines dead and life support failing. "Any response yet?" she asked her communications officer, though she already knew the answer from the slump of his shoulders. "Nothing from the hegemony fleet, Captain," Officer Veltar replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The nearest patrol ship is still 40 cycles out, and—" He paused, not wanting to speak the obvious truth. "And we'll be dead in 12, Zarathul finished for him. She looked around the bridge at her crew of 17, all good people, scientists, explorers, peacekeepers who had dedicated their lives to expanding knowledge and maintaining harmony between the civilized worlds. They didn't deserve to die floating in the emptiness between stars. The Kethmoran were not a warrior race. Their pale blue skin and delicate frames reflected generations of peaceful development on their garden world of Kethmo, where the greatest conflicts involved academic debates and artistic disagreements. They had joined the Galactic hegemony as explorers and diplomats, content to map new systems and catalog strange phenomena, while others handled the messy business of defense and security. That peaceful nature might be their downfall now. "Captain?" Veltar's voice suddenly carried a note of surprise. "I'm receiving a response to our distress call." Zarathul's head snapped up, hope flaring in her chest like a small sun. "The hegemony?" "No, ma'am. The signal origin is—" Veltar frowned at his instruments, tentacles twitching with confusion. "It's coming from the outer rim, grid sector 779. That's Deathworlder space, Captain." A chill ran through the bridge that had nothing to do with their failing life support. The outer rim was where the galaxy's most dangerous species made their homes, worlds so hostile that they produced beings capable of surviving nearly anywhere. The hegemony maintained a careful peace with the Deathworlders, but everyone knew the stories. Beings who could shrug off radiation that would kill most civilized races. Creatures who thrived in gravity wells that would crush a Kethmoran to paste, warriors who had evolved on planets where everything wanted to kill them, and the most terrifying of all were the humans. "What does the message say?" Zarathul asked, surprised that her voice remained steady. Veltar manipulated his console with practiced movements. "It's actually quite polite, Captain. They acknowledge our distress call and say they're en route to render assistance. Estimated arrival in 4 standard cycles." 4 cycles. They could last that long if they cut life support to non-essential areas and had the crew gather in the main compartments. It would be uncomfortable, but they would survive. "There's something else, Captain," Veltar added, his voice uncertain. "The ship's identification reads as the Teenage Wasteland. Registry shows it as a human training vessel." "Training vessel?" Chief Engineer Rixnell looked up from his futile attempts to coax life from their dead engines. "What kind of training requires a ship in Deathworlder space?" Nobody had an answer for that. 3 cycles later, proximity alarms began to sound. Zarathul dragged herself to the bridge, dizzy from oxygen deprivation and the cold that had settled deep into her bones. The ship approaching them was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was built like a predator, all sharp angles and armored hull plating. Weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some hunting beast, and massive engines glowed with barely contained power. But what struck her most was its size. The vessel was huge, easily twice the mass of their research ship, and it moved through space with the fluid grace of something alive. "They're hailing us, Captain," Veltar managed, his voice weak but functional. "On screen." The view screen flickered to life, and Zarathul nearly fell from her command chair. Staring back at her were the faces of humans, but they were young, very young. The one who seemed to be in charge couldn't have been more than 16 standard years old by her species' development markers. He had the distinctive features of his kind: the forward-facing predator eyes, the dental structure that included sharpened teeth, the underlying bone structure that spoke of a species evolved for conflict. But despite his youth, he carried himself with a confidence that made Zarathul instinctively straighten in her chair. "This is Cadet Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Federation starship Teenage Wasteland," the young human said, his voice clear and strong. "We received your distress call and we're here to help. What's your situation?" Zarathul found her voice after a moment of stunned silence. "I am Captain Zarathul of the research vessel, Silent Tide. Our main engines are offline and life support is failing. We have 17 crew members aboard." The human nodded, and she could see him processing the information with startling efficiency. Behind him, she glimpsed other young humans moving with purpose across what was clearly a military-grade bridge. They couldn't all be children, could they? "Copy that, Captain. We're going to bring your ship into our cargo bay and get your life support stabilized. My engineering team will take a look at your engines. How long has your life support been degraded?" 6 cycles, she replied, then quickly added, "That's approximately 144 of your standard hours." The human's expression tightened slightly. "Understood. We'll have you aboard in 30 minutes. My medical team will be standing by to treat any oxygen deprivation symptoms." The connection ended, and Zarathul stared at the blank screen in bewilderment. The response had been professional, efficient, and completely at odds with what she knew about Deathworlder youth. Among civilized races, young people were protected, kept safe until they reached maturity and could contribute to society. They certainly weren't put in charge of massive warships and sent into the dangerous reaches of space. "Captain," her navigator, Keslim, spoke up from his station. "Are we really going to trust our lives to children?" It was a fair question, but as Zarathul watched the massive human vessel maneuver with impossible precision to align with their cargo bay, she found herself thinking that these might not be typical children. The docking process was flawless. The human ship's tractor beams locked onto their vessel with gentle but irresistible force, drawing them into a cargo bay that was larger than some space stations Zarathul had visited. As soon as their ship was secured, she could hear the hiss of atmosphere being pumped into the bay. Minutes later, a delegation of young humans entered their ship through the airlock. They moved with the fluid, purposeful strides of trained soldiers, despite their apparent youth. The leader, Jake Morrison, couldn't have been older than 18, but he carried himself like a veteran officer. Behind him came what was clearly a medical team and several engineers. "Captain Zarathul," Jake said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "It's good to meet you in person. Dr. Sarah Chen here will check on your crew while my engineers assess your ship's condition." Zarathul accepted the handshake, noting the strength in the young human's grip. "Commander Morrison, I must ask, are you truly in command of that vessel? You seem young." Jake's lips quirked in what she was learning to recognize as a human smile. "I'm 17, if that's what you're asking. And yes, I'm in command. The Teenage Wasteland is an academy training ship. We're on a long-range patrol as part of our final year exercises." "Academy?" Zarathul felt her world shift slightly. "You're still students." "Senior class?" one of the other humans piped up cheerfully. She appeared even younger than Jake, with bright blue eyes and an infectious grin. "I'm Cadet Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, Chief Engineer. Don't worry about your engines. We'll have you running in no time." Dr. Chen, a serious-looking young woman who moved with the quick efficiency of an experienced medic, was already examining Veltar with a handheld scanner. "Oxygen saturation is low but not critical," she announced. I want everyone to take it easy for the next few hours while we get your ship's atmosphere normalized. Zarathul watched in amazement as the human students worked. They moved with purpose and skill that belied their youth, coordinating their efforts with the kind of seamless teamwork that usually took years to develop. Within an hour, they had her ship's life support running at full capacity and were making rapid progress on the engine repairs. "How long have you been in space?" she asked Jake as they stood in her newly warmed bridge. "This patrol?" "About 6 months. We're heading out to the Rim territories to practice long-range navigation and deep space protocols. Your distress call was actually the first real emergency we've encountered." "The first?" Zarathul stared at him. "You mean you've never done this before?" "Not a real rescue, no. But we've trained for it thousands of times in simulation. And our instructors always said that when someone needs help in space, you don't hesitate. You help first and worry about everything else later." There was something in the way he said it that made Zarathul realize she was seeing a fundamental difference between human culture and that of the civilized worlds. These weren't just students playing at being soldiers. They were young people who had been taught that with great capability came great responsibility, and they took that responsibility seriously. "Your ship," she said, gesturing toward the massive vessel surrounding them. "It's armed." "Yes, ma'am. The Outer Rim can be dangerous. Pirates, hostile wildlife, natural phenomena that can tear a ship apart if you're not prepared. We're equipped to handle threats, but our mission is exploration and aid." "And they sent children to do this?" Jake's expression grew serious. "Captain, with respect, we're not children by human standards. On Earth, 17 is considered adult enough for military service. We've been training for this since we were 12. By the time we graduate, we'll be ready for anything the galaxy can throw at us." As if to prove his point, Amy Rodriguez's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. "Bridge, this is engineering. We've identified the problem with your main drive. Looks like a cascade failure in your antimatter injection system. We can fabricate replacement components, but it'll take about 18 hours to machine them and another 6 to install." "Copy that, Amy," Jake replied without hesitation. "What do you need?" "Just time and maybe some help from their engineering crew to understand their system architecture better." Jake looked at Zarathul. "Captain, we'd be happy to host your crew aboard the Teenage Wasteland while the repairs are completed. Our ship has full recreational facilities, a proper medical bay, and quarters that will be more comfortable than what you have here while the repairs are ongoing." The offer was generous, perhaps too generous. "Why are you doing this?" Zarathul asked. "We can't pay you. Our government has no formal treaties with yours. You have nothing to gain from helping us." Jake looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "You needed help," he said simply. "That's enough." Over the next day, as her crew was hosted aboard the human training vessel, Zarathul found herself constantly surprised. The ship was indeed crewed entirely by young humans, none older than 19, but they ran their vessel with the efficiency of seasoned veterans. They had proper military discipline, tempered with the kind of enthusiasm and innovation that only came with youth. More surprising still was how they treated her crew. There was no condescension, no sense that they were merely tolerating the weak aliens they had rescued. Instead, the young humans showed genuine curiosity about Kethmaran culture and science, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own knowledge freely. Dr. Chen insisted on giving her entire crew complete medical examinations, not just treating their immediate oxygen deprivation. "Preventive care," she explained cheerfully. "My instructors always said that a healthy crew is a happy crew." Amy Rodriguez spent hours with Chief Engineer Rixnall, not just fixing their engines, but explaining human engineering principles and learning about Kethmaran technology in return. "Your power distribution system is incredibly elegant," she told him. "Way more efficient than ours in some areas. I'm definitely going to include this in my senior thesis." Even the recreational time was illuminating. The humans invited the Kethmoran crew to join them for meals in their mess hall, where Zarathul watched 17-year-old human cadets debate philosophy, share stories of their homeworlds, and plan future missions, with the kind of earnest idealism that made her remember why she had become an explorer in the first place. "What will you do after graduation?" she asked Jake during one such meal. "Probably deep space exploration," he replied, taking a bite of what he called spaghetti and meatballs, a human comfort food that several of her crew had developed a fondness for. "The Academy has programs for charting new systems, making first contact with unknown species, and providing aid to remote colonies. I want to make a difference out there." "Isn't that dangerous work?" Jake shrugged. "Everything worth doing is dangerous to some degree, but that's what we train for. And we don't go alone. We go as a team. That's the human way." As the repairs entered their final phase, Zarathul found herself in the observation deck with Jake, looking out at the stars. The view was spectacular, with their two ships silhouetted against a brilliant nebula. "I misjudged your species," she said quietly. "I thought Deathworlders were different." "We are different," Jake replied. "We have to be. Earth isn't an easy world to live on, but being tough doesn't mean being cruel. If anything, surviving on a harsh world teaches you the value of cooperation and mutual aid. When the environment is trying to kill you, you learn to take care of each other." "Your instructors taught you well." "They did. But more than that, it's just who we are. Humans have a saying, leave no one behind. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien, friend or stranger. If someone needs help and we can provide it, we do." The next morning, Amy Rodriguez announced that the repairs were complete. The Silent Tide was not only functional, but running better than it had in years, with several human improvements integrated into its systems. "We've uploaded our technical manuals to your database," Amy explained to Rixnall. "So you'll be able to maintain the upgrades we've made, and if you ever need parts or technical support, just send a message to Earth Fleet Academy. They'll make sure you get what you need." As the Kethmoran crew prepared to depart, Jake pulled Zarathul aside. "Captain, there's something you should know. When we picked up your distress call, we weren't the only ship that heard it." Zarathul felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "There are pirates operating in this sector, nasty ones who prey on disabled ships. If we hadn't reached you first—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. "How do you know this?" "We've been tracking them for weeks as part of our patrol mission. Intelligence suggests they've been responsible for at least a dozen ship disappearances in this region. When your distress call went out, they were only about 8 hours away from your position. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If the young humans hadn't responded to their call, her crew wouldn't have been rescued by pirates. They would have been captured, enslaved, or worse." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you had enough to worry about. But I wanted you to know that we're going to take care of the pirate problem. It's what we're out here for." Zarathul stared at this 17-year-old human, who spoke so casually about hunting down dangerous criminals. "You're going after them?" "Yes, ma'am. Can't have them threatening innocent travelers." Jake's expression hardened slightly, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the predator lurking beneath his friendly exterior. "Don't worry, though. We're well trained for this kind of operation." As the Silent Tide disengaged from the human ship and powered up its newly repaired engines, Zarathul stood on her bridge watching the teenage wasteland prepare to depart. The massive vessel moved with deadly grace, its weapon systems coming online with casual efficiency that spoke of serious military capability. These weren't just students on a training mission. They were the young of a warrior species sent into the galaxy's most dangerous regions, not despite their youth, but because of what that youth represented: the future of humanity's commitment to justice and protection of the innocent. "Safe travels, Silent Tide," came Jake's voice over the comm. It was an honor to help you. The honor was ours, Commander Morrison. Thank you for showing us what young humans are capable of. Just remember, Captain, if you ever need help again, just call. Someone will come. As the two ships parted ways, Zarathul realized that her understanding of the galaxy had fundamentally changed. She had always thought of Deathworlders as dangerous, unpredictable beings to be avoided. But now she knew better. They were dangerous, yes. But that danger was tempered by something even more powerful, an unwavering moral code that compelled them to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And if this was what their young were capable of, she could only imagine what their adults might accomplish. The thought was both terrifying and oddly comforting. The teenage wasteland had been tracking the pirate vessel for 3 days now, maintaining a careful distance while gathering intelligence. On the bridge, 17-year-old Commander Jake Morrison studied the tactical displays with the focused intensity that had earned him his position despite his youth. "Contact is maintaining course toward the shipping lanes," reported Cadet Navigator Lisa Park, her fingers dancing over her console. "They're definitely hunting." "Any additional signals?" Jake asked. "Negative on communications traffic, but I'm picking up engine signatures from at least 2 more vessels holding position near the asteroid field," replied Cadet Lieutenant Tom Vasquez from the sensor station. "Looks like they're coordinating." Jake nodded thoughtfully. 3 ships meant this wasn't just opportunistic piracy. This was an organized operation, and that made them significantly more dangerous. The briefings from Fleet Intelligence had indicated that this particular group had been responsible for capturing at least 12 civilian vessels in the past 6 months, with no survivors ever found. "What's our tactical assessment, Maria?" he asked his tactical officer. Cadet Lieutenant Maria Santos was 16 years old and had scored higher on combat simulations than some graduated officers. She studied her displays with the cold precision that made her one of the most respected cadets in their class. "Lead vessel is a modified Zergat heavy cruiser, twice our mass, but older tech. The 2 in the asteroid field appear to be Karneth raiders, fast, lightly armed, probably used for pursuit and capture. Standard pirate tactics would be to use the raiders to disable a target's engines while the heavy cruiser closes for boarding." "Crew estimates?" "Zergat cruiser can carry up to 300 beings. The raiders probably have crews of 30 to 40 each. We're looking at potential hostile contact with 400 pirates." Jake's bridge crew was silent as they absorbed those numbers. The teenage wasteland carried a complement of 60 cadets and 10 instructors. They were outnumbered nearly 7 to 1. "Recommended action?" Jake asked quietly. Maria didn't hesitate. "We engage. These pirates have killed innocent people and they're actively hunting more victims. We can't let that continue just because they outnumber us." Around the bridge, heads nodded in agreement. These young humans had been trained not just in tactics and technology, but in moral clarity. When faced with evil, you fought it, regardless of the odds. "Amy, what's our technical situation?" Jake called to the engineering station. Cadet Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her displays with her characteristic grin. "All systems green, Commander. I've made some modifications to our weapon systems based on the intelligence data. We should be able to punch through their shields more efficiently than they expect." "What kind of modifications?" "Standard human approach. We improved everything. Phaser arrays are running at 112% efficiency, torpedo tubes have enhanced targeting systems, and I've rigged the shields to reflect certain energy frequencies back at attackers. Oh, and I may have accidentally made our engines about 15% faster." Jake shook his head in amazement. Amy's genius for engineering was matched only by her complete inability to explain her improvements in terms that mere mortals could understand. "Accidentally? Well, I was trying to optimize fuel consumption and increase power output, And it turns out our engine design had some inefficiencies that were easy to fix once you understood the quantum mechanics involved. She shrugged as if redesigning starship engines was something people did in their spare time. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came over the intercom from sickbay. "Medical stations are ready, Jake. I've got trauma teams standing by and emergency supplies distributed throughout the ship. We're prepared for casualties." The casual way she discussed potential injuries reminded Jake that despite their youth, his crew had trained extensively for real combat. Human military doctrine emphasized that if you were going to fight, you prepared for every possible outcome, including the worst ones. "Communications, patch me through to the Academy Emergency Channel. I want to file a tactical report before we engage." Cadet Communications Officer David Kim nodded and established the connection. Within moments, the weathered face of Admiral Rebecca Hayes appeared on the main screen. She was one of the Academy's senior instructors, a veteran of the border wars who had personally requested assignment to train the next generation of human officers. "Commander Morrison," she said without preamble, "report your status." "Admiral, we have identified and tracked the pirate group responsible for the shipping lane attacks. 3 vessels, estimated 400 hostiles, actively hunting civilian targets. Request permission to engage." Admiral Hayes studied him for a long moment. "Son, you're outnumbered 7-1 by hostile forces with superior firepower. Standard protocol would be to withdraw and call for reinforcement." "Yes, ma'am. But they're about to attack another civilian vessel. Sensor readings indicate a small passenger transport approaching their kill zone. If we withdraw, innocent people will die. And if you engage, your people might die." Jake's voice was steady when he replied. "Admiral, that's what we signed up for. Every person on this ship volunteered to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. We've trained our entire lives for this moment. We're ready." Behind him, his bridge crew voiced quiet agreements. These weren't children playing at war. They were young warriors who understood exactly what they were choosing. Admiral Hayes was quiet for several seconds, and Jake could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, she nodded slowly. "You have tactical command authorization, Commander Morrison. Show them what human courage looks like." "Yes, ma'am. We won't let you down." As the connection ended, Jake turned to his crew. "You all heard the Admiral. This is real combat against real enemies who have killed real people. Anyone who wants to transfer to support duties, speak up now. No shame in it." Not a single hand was raised. "All right then. Amy, take us to full combat readiness. Maria, I want tactical solutions for all 3 enemy vessels. Lisa, plot an intercept course that puts us between the pirates and the civilian transport. Tom, start jamming their communications. I don't want them coordinating their attack." The bridge transformed as his crew moved to combat stations. Lights dimmed to tactical levels, displays switched to targeting solutions, and the gentle hum of the ship's systems took on the more aggressive sound of weapons charging and shields strengthening. "Commander," Lisa announced, "the passenger transport has entered the kill zone. Pirates are beginning their approach." On the main screen, they could see the 3 pirate vessels moving to surround their victim. The civilian ship was a small passenger liner, probably carrying families or business travelers between the outer colonies. It had no weapons and minimal shields, exactly the kind of helpless target the pirates preferred. "Take us in, Lisa, maximum velocity." The teenage wasteland dropped out of stealth and accelerated toward the combat zone like an arrow shot from a bow. The ship's advanced engines, enhanced by Amy's modifications, pushed them forward at a speed that caught the pirates completely off guard. "Enemy vessels are hailing us," David reported. "They're demanding we withdraw or be destroyed." "Ignore them. Maria, target the lead raider. I want them disabled, not destroyed if possible." "Aye, sir. Targeting their engines and weapon systems." The first exchange of fire lit up space between the ships. The pirate raider, expecting to face a helpless civilian vessel, instead found itself under attack by a ship with military-grade shields and weapons operated by people who had trained extensively for exactly this scenario. Maria's targeting was flawless. Phaser beams lanced out with surgical precision, overloading the raider's shields and systematically destroying its weapon ports. Within seconds, the pirate ship was dead in space, its crew alive but helpless. "First raider neutralized," Maria reported with satisfaction. "Second raider is moving to attack. Heavy cruiser is advancing on our position. Amy, can you give me more speed?" "Already on it." Amy's voice was filled with excitement as she pushed their engines beyond theoretical limits. "We're now running at 125% normal velocity. The pirates can't match this." The second raider tried to use its superior maneuverability to get behind them, but Tom Vasquez had anticipated this tactic. His sensor array tracked every move the enemy made, feeding precise targeting data to Maria's weapons systems. "Got a lock on their primary systems," Maria announced. "Firing." This time, the engagement lasted even less time than the first. The pirate crew, expecting to face frightened merchants or poorly armed patrol ships, found themselves outmatched by young humans who had studied every aspect of space combat and trained relentlessly to perfect their skills. "Second raider disabled," Maria reported. "Heavy cruiser is accelerating toward us. They're charging weapons." Now came the real test. The Zergat heavy cruiser was a serious warship, modified by pirates but still carrying enough firepower to threaten a dozen smaller vessels. Its massive engines pushed it forward while its weapon ports began to glow with gathering energy. "They're hailing us again," David announced. "Put them through," Jake ordered. The face that appeared on their screen was that of a Zergat pirate captain, his scaled features twisted with anger and contempt. "Human children," he snarled in heavily accented standard. "You have made a grave mistake. Surrender now, and I may allow your deaths to be quick." Jake looked at the pirate captain with the calm confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. "Captain, you have 3 seconds to surrender your vessel and submit to arrest for piracy, kidnapping, and murder. Otherwise, we will take you by force." The alien's laughter was like grinding metal. You are nothing but children playing with toys. We have destroyed warships twice your size." 3 seconds, Jake repeated calmly. The pirate captain's expression changed as he realized the young human was completely serious. "You cannot be serious. You are outnumbered. We have 300 warriors to your handful of children." 2 seconds. "This is madness. You will all die." 1 second. Jake's voice never wavered. The transmission ended as the pirate captain cut the connection. Almost immediately, the heavy cruiser opened fire with everything it had. Energy beams powerful enough to crack a moon's surface converged on the position where the teenage wasteland had been. But Amy's engine modifications meant they weren't where the pirates expected them to be. "Evasive pattern Delta," Jake ordered calmly. "Maria, return fire. Target their bridge and main weapon systems." What followed was a masterclass in space combat tactics. The young humans used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of the heavier ship's weapons while systematically dismantling its offensive capabilities. Maria's targeting was surgical, Tom's sensor work was flawless, and Lisa's navigation kept them exactly where they needed to be at every moment. But the pirates weren't helpless. The heavy cruiser's captain was experienced, and he began using his ship's superior mass and armor to absorb damage while trying to ram the smaller human vessel. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Amy reported as a lucky shot from the pirates penetrated their shields. "Damage control teams responding." "Casualties?" Jake asked. "2 injured, both stable," came Dr. Chen's voice from medical. "We're handling it." The battle continued for another 20 minutes, with the 2 ships dancing through space in a deadly ballet of attack and evasion. Slowly, the superior training and coordination of the human crew began to tell. The pirate ship's weapons went offline one by one, its shields failed, and its engines began to sputter. "Enemy vessel is dead in space," Maria announced. "All weapons offline, engines down, life support functional. David, hail them." The pirate captain's face reappeared, but his arrogance was gone. In its place was the shocked expression of someone who had just learned that his assumptions about the universe were completely wrong. "This is impossible," he whispered. "You are children." "We're human children," Jake corrected quietly. "There's a difference. You're under arrest for piracy, kidnapping, and murder. Prepare to be boarded." The boarding operation that followed was conducted with the same professional competence that had marked the space battle. Teams of young humans in combat armor moved through the pirate ship with practiced efficiency, securing prisoners and gathering evidence of their crimes. Dr. Chen set up a field medical station to treat injured pirates alongside the 2 wounded crew members from the teenage wasteland. When questioned about treating their enemies, she simply shrugged. "The Hippocratic Oath doesn't have an age limit or a species exclusion. If someone's hurt, I help them." Among the evidence they recovered were the personal effects of dozens of victims. Families who had been traveling between colonies, merchants carrying goods to frontier worlds, scientists on research missions. All of them had answered distress calls or been caught by the pirates' hunting tactics. "How many?" Jake asked quietly as he reviewed the casualty reports. "At least 47 confirmed victims over the past 6 months," reported Cadet Security Chief Marcus Wong. "Probably more that we haven't found evidence for yet." Jake nodded grimly. Each number represented people with families, dreams, and futures that had been cut short by greed and cruelty. The weight of that knowledge settled on his young shoulders, but he bore it without complaint. This was what command meant, taking responsibility not just for your own crew, but for all the innocent people depending on you to keep them safe. "The civilian transport is sending a message," David announced. "They want to thank us." "Put them through." The screen showed the bridge of the passenger liner, where a middle-aged Talarian captain stared at them with undisguised amazement. I don't know how to thank you. When we saw those pirate ships surrounding us, we thought we were dead." "Just doing our job, Captain," Jake replied. "Is your ship undamaged?" "Minor shield drain from their initial scans, but otherwise fine. But you're all so young. How did you—" "We trained for it," Jake said simply. "Every day, for years. When the moment came, we were ready." After the prisoners were secured and the damaged pirate ships taken under tow, Jake called his crew together in the main assembly hall. 60 young faces looked back at him, faces that had aged slightly in the past few hours as they processed their first real combat experience. "What we did today," Jake began, "was exactly what we trained to do. We protected innocent people from those who would harm them. We upheld the values that humanity stands for in this galaxy: courage, justice, and the belief that the strong have a duty to protect the weak." He paused, looking around at his crew. "You all performed with honor. You showed that age is just a number. What matters is training, dedication, and moral courage. Today, you proved that human young are just as capable of heroism as human adults." Cadet Lieutenant Rodriguez raised her hand. "Commander, what happens now?" "Now we escort the passenger transport to safety, deliver our prisoners to the appropriate authorities, and continue our patrol. There are other people out there who need our help, and we're going to make sure they get it." As the crew dispersed to their duties, Jake remained behind with his senior officers. They were quiet for a moment, processing what they had accomplished. "That pirate captain," Maria said thoughtfully. "He really couldn't believe we were just teenagers." "Most species protect their young," Tom observed. "They can't imagine sending them into danger." "But that's what makes us different," Amy added. "Human young aren't just protected, we're prepared. By the time we're old enough to serve, we're ready to handle anything." Jake nodded. It was true. Human culture had evolved on a world where danger was constant, where survival required not just individual strength, but collective responsibility. Human children weren't sheltered from reality. They were gradually introduced to it, trained to handle it, and taught that with great capability came great duty. "Signal the academy," Jake ordered David. "Tell them the mission was successful and we're continuing patrol operations." As the teenage wasteland resumed its course through the Outer Rim territories, Jake stood on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other ships were in distress, other innocent people needed help, and other threats needed to be dealt with. And when those calls for help came, they would be answered by humans. Young humans, perhaps, but humans nonetheless. Humans who had been taught that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of fear. Humans who believed that with great power came great responsibility. The galaxy was learning what that meant. Behind him, the duty officer announced over the ship's intercom, "All stations, this is Bridge. Resume normal patrol operations. Maintain full sensor sweeps for distress signals or hostile contacts." Jake smiled slightly as he headed back to the bridge. It was going to be a good patrol. 3 weeks after the pirate incident, Captain Zarathul found herself standing in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Hegemony, preparing to deliver a report that would change how the civilized galaxy viewed humanity forever. The massive chamber buzzed with conversation as representatives from dozens of species took their seats, each more curious than the last about why an emergency session had been called. The Council of Species was an august body, representing the most advanced and peaceful civilizations in known space. The Keth Moran held seats alongside the wise Talarians, the artistic Zephyrians, the scholarly Veltar, and dozens of other races that had achieved spaceflight through cooperation and careful development. They were the guardians of galactic peace, the protectors of civilization against the chaos of the Outer Rim. And today they were about to learn that their assumptions about the universe were incomplete. "The chair recognizes Captain Zarathul of the Kethmoran science vessel Silent Tide," announced High Counselor Mirandel, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. Zarathul stepped forward, her prepared remarks suddenly seeming inadequate for what she needed to convey. How did one explain that everything they thought they knew about Deathworlder species was wrong? "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 3 weeks ago, my ship suffered a catastrophic engine failure in the Outer Rim territories. We sent a distress signal, not expecting anyone to respond. The nearest hegemony vessel was weeks away, and we had less than 12 standard cycles of life support remaining. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Emergency rescues in the Outer Rim were notoriously difficult, and most ships that suffered major failures in those regions were simply never seen again. "Our signal was answered," Zarathul continued, "but not by whom we expected. The ship that responded was from Earth, a human vessel. Specifically, a training ship crewed entirely by human adolescents on their final academy exercises." The murmurs grew louder. Several counselors leaned forward in their seats, clearly interested in where this was going. "These young humans, none older than 18 standard years by our measurements, not only rescued my crew, but repaired our ship with improvements that exceeded our original specifications. They provided medical care, hospitality, and technical assistance without any expectation of payment or political advantage." High Counselor Mirandal raised one delicate hand. "Captain, while we appreciate the humans' assistance, surely this is a routine matter of interstellar aid. Why does this require emergency session of the full council?" Zarathul took a deep breath. "Because 3 days after they rescued us, those same human adolescents single-handedly destroyed a pirate fleet that had been terrorizing the shipping lanes for months. A fleet that had killed dozens of innocent beings from multiple species, including several council member worlds. Silence fell over the chamber like a physical weight. "I have with me the complete tactical recordings of the engagement," Zarathul continued, gesturing to her aide who activated the chamber's holographic display system, "as well as testimony from survivors and recovered evidence proving the pirates' crimes." The display lit up with the sensor recordings from both the Silent Tide and the passenger transport that had witnessed the battle. The assembled counselors watched in stunned silence as 17-year-old Jake Morrison calmly faced down a pirate captain threatening to kill him, then proceeded to systematically dismantle 3 enemy vessels with tactical precision that would have impressed veteran fleet commanders. When the recordings ended, the chamber remained silent for nearly a full minute. "These humans," spoke Counselor Vexhan of the Talarian Federation, his voice thoughtful. "They fought with such coordination, such purpose. How old did you say they were?" "The eldest was 17. The youngest I observed was 15 standard years," Zarathul replied. "But age seemed irrelevant to their capabilities." "Impossible," declared Counselor Orthmel from the Zergot Empire, the same species as the pirate captain the humans had defeated. "Adolescents cannot possess such tactical knowledge or maintain discipline under combat stress. The recordings must be falsified." Zarathul had expected this response. "Counselor Orthmel, with respect, I invite you to examine the recordings with your own technical experts. You will find them authentic. More importantly, I have additional testimony." She nodded to her aide again, and a new holographic projection appeared. The image of the Talarian passenger transport captain who had witnessed the battle firsthand. "Captain Veltorin of the passenger liner. Gentle Current has agreed to testify before this assembly," Zarathul announced. The Talarian captain's image nodded respectfully to the assembly. "Honored counselors, I was present during the engagement described by Captain Zarathul. My ship and 43 passengers were about to be captured by pirates when the human training vessel arrived. What followed was unlike anything I have ever witnessed." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The human commander, a being who appeared barely past childhood by our standards, displayed tactical brilliance that saved not only my ship, but exposed a criminal network responsible for dozens of atrocities. But more importantly, when given the opportunity to destroy the pirate vessels completely, he chose to disable them instead, preserving the lives of his enemies. Another counselor, this one from the Arthropod Collective, spoke up. "This mercy toward enemies, this is unusual behavior for Deathworlder species." Captain Veltorin nodded. "That was my thought as well. But when I asked the young commander about it, he said something I will never forget. Taking a life should never be easy, even when it's necessary. We fight to protect people, not to kill them." The weight of those words settled over the assembly. Here was a species that everyone assumed was governed by aggression and violence, demonstrating moral sophistication that many civilized worlds struggled to achieve. High Counselor Mirandal spoke carefully. "Captain Zarathul, what is your assessment of these humans? Do they represent a threat to galactic peace?" Zarathul had been dreading this question, but she had her answer ready. "Counselor, they represent the opposite of a threat. They are a guarantee of galactic peace, but not in the way we might expect." She activated another display, this one showing star charts of the Outer Rim territories. "Since their rescue of my vessel, I have been monitoring human activities in the frontier regions. In 3 weeks, ships from Earth have responded to 17 distress calls, prevented 4 pirate attacks, provided medical aid to 3 colony worlds, and established peaceful first contact with 2 previously unknown species." The scope of human activity drew impressed murmurs from the assembly. More significantly, Zarathul continued, they have done all of this with training vessels, ships crewed by their youth. Their actual military and exploration fleets are conducting operations far beyond even these activities. Counselor Orthmel looked troubled. You speak as though this is positive news, but a species that trains its children for war trains its children for service, Zarathul corrected firmly. There is a crucial difference. During my time aboard their vessel, I observed their crew extensively. These young humans were not bloodthirsty warriors seeking glory. They were idealistic young people committed to protecting others, even at the cost of their own lives. She gestured to a new display showing the interior of the teenage wasteland. Their ship was equipped with extensive recreational facilities, educational programs, and cultural exchange materials. They were as interested in learning about other species as they were in combat training. Their libraries contained works of literature, philosophy, and art from hundreds of worlds. But they fought so effectively, observed another counselor. Such tactical skill requires extensive military conditioning. Yes, Zarathul agreed. They are conditioned for combat. But they are conditioned equally strongly for moral behavior. The same training that taught them to disable enemy ships also taught them to provide medical aid to enemy wounded and to show mercy to defeated foes. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Counselors, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be a Deathworld species. We assumed that surviving on hostile worlds produces beings that are hostile themselves. But humans demonstrate that the opposite may be true. Explain, requested High Counselor Mirandal. Humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them, not through malice, but through natural processes, predators, disease, natural disasters, resource scarcity. To survive such conditions, they had to develop not just individual strength, but collective cooperation. A human who thought only of themselves would die quickly on Earth. Zarathul activated a new display showing images of Earth's diverse environments. Their home world forced them to learn that survival depended on taking care of each other. The strong protect the weak, not out of altruism, but because species survival requires it. This has become so fundamental to their nature that they extend this protective instinct to other species. The implications of her words rippled through the assembly. If humans were protective rather than predatory, it changed everything about how the galaxy should interact with them. There is more, Zarathul continued. After the pirate incident, I conducted research into human activities throughout the galaxy. In the past year alone, human vessels have responded to over 3,000 distress calls from non-human ships. They have provided disaster relief to 17 worlds affected by natural catastrophes. They have mediated peaceful solutions to 7 interplanetary conflicts. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many counselors as possible. And in every case, they have asked for nothing in return. No territory, no trade advantages, no political concessions. They help because helping is what humans do. Counselor Vexhan leaned forward thoughtfully. Captain, you mentioned that these were training vessels. What does this suggest about their actual military capabilities? That we have been fortunate that humans prefer cooperation to conquest, Zarathul replied honestly. If their teenagers can defeat organized pirate fleets, their adults could probably challenge entire sector fleets, but they don't want to. Their goal isn't domination, it's protection. A new voice entered the discussion, the elderly counselor Arthek from the Wisdom Keepers. In all of galactic history, we have never encountered a species with such capabilities that chose to use them for protection rather than expansion. This is unprecedented. Which brings us to why I requested this emergency session, Zarathul said. Counselors, humanity is expanding into the galaxy whether we engage with them or not. The question is whether we will meet them as friends or strangers. She gestured to a final display showing current human exploration routes. Human ships are already patrolling trade routes, responding to emergencies and making contact with new species throughout the Outer Rim. They are becoming a galactic presence by their actions, not their politics. What do you recommend? Asked High Counselor Mirandal. Formal diplomatic contact, Zarathul replied without hesitation. The hegemony should establish relations with Earth before other powers do, not because we fear them, but because they represent exactly the kind of ally we need for the challenges ahead. What challenges? Asked another counselor. Zarathul's expression grew serious. Counselors, the Outer Rim is becoming increasingly dangerous. Pirate activity is rising, unknown species are expanding aggressively, and there are regions of space where even our best ships dare not venture. The galaxy needs protectors, beings capable of standing against threats too dangerous for peaceful species to handle alone. She gestured toward the recording of the human cadets. These young humans destroyed a pirate fleet that had been terrorizing shipping for months. They did it not for profit or territory, but because innocent people were being hurt. If we establish formal relations with Earth, we gain access to the most effective protection force in the galaxy. And if we don't? Asked Counselor Orthmel. Then humanity will continue expanding and protecting the galaxy without us, Zarathul replied. And when history judges who stood for peace and protection, the hegemony will be remembered as the alliance that chose isolation over cooperation. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some counselors worried about the implications of allying with a warrior species. Others questioned whether humans could be trusted with such power. But gradually, a consensus began to emerge. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans had demonstrated not just capability, but moral character. They had shown that power could be wielded responsibly, that strength could serve justice rather than conquest. When the final vote was taken, it was unanimous. The galactic hegemony would extend formal diplomatic recognition to Earth and invite humanity to join as a member species with full rights and responsibilities. 6 months later, Captain Zarathul stood in the same Grand Assembly Hall, but this time she was not alone. Beside her stood Admiral Rebecca Hayes of Earth Fleet Academy, representing humanity's formal acceptance into the galactic community. The ceremony was simple, but profound. As Admiral Hayes spoke the words of the membership oath, Zarathul found herself thinking about the events that had led to this moment. A distress call that should have gone unanswered. Young humans who chose to help strangers rather than ignore their plight. A battle that demonstrated that courage and compassion could coexist in the same beings. The galaxy is safer today because of choices made by humans barely out of childhood, Admiral Hayes said as she concluded her remarks. But those choices reflect values that define our entire species. We seek no dominion over others. We claim no superior wisdom. We offer only our strength in service of peace and our commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. As the ceremony concluded and the various species began mingling, Zarathul found herself approached by a familiar young human in a fleet uniform. Jake Morrison had graduated from the academy with highest honors and been assigned to humanity's first diplomatic mission. "Commander Morrison," she said warmly, using his new rank. "Congratulations on your graduation." "Thank you, Captain, but I prefer to think of this as a beginning rather than an ending." Jake looked around the assembly hall, watching humans and aliens engage in animated conversations. "When we rescued your ship, I never imagined it would lead to this." "You responded to a distress call," Zarathul replied. "Everything else followed from that choice. That's the human way, though. You see someone who needs help, you help them. Everything else works itself out." Zarathul watched as young humans mingled with alien diplomats, sharing stories and making new friends with the easy confidence that had impressed her so much aboard the teenage wasteland. These beings, who had been raised on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds, were proving to be its most effective ambassadors for peace. "Commander," she said thoughtfully, "what will you do now that humanity is part of the hegemony?" Jake's expression grew serious, but his eyes held the same moral clarity that had impressed her during their first meeting. "Same thing we've always done, Captain. Patrol the frontier, respond to distress calls, protect people who need protecting. The only difference is now we'll be doing it with official backing, instead of just because it's right." He paused, watching as Dr. Sarah Chen, now Lieutenant Chen, demonstrated human medical techniques to a group of fascinated Talarian physicians. The galaxy is a big place, and there are still a lot of people out there who need help. As long as that's true, humans will answer the call. As the evening progressed and the formal ceremony gave way to informal celebration, Zarathul found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that desperate day when her ship's engines failed in the Outer Rim. She had sent out a distress call hoping for rescue, and instead had discovered something far more valuable: proof that the galaxy contained beings who would risk everything to help strangers. The humans called it duty. They called it service. They called it simply doing what was right. Whatever they called it, it had changed everything. Later that night, as the various diplomatic missions prepared to return to their home worlds, Admiral Hayes approached Zarathul with a data pad in her hand. "Captain, I wanted to give you this personally," she said, offering the device. "It's a copy of Commander Morrison's Academy thesis on interspecies cooperation. He based much of his research on his experiences with your crew." Zarathul accepted the pad and glanced at the title. "Duty Beyond Species: How Moral Courage Transcends Biological Boundaries." "He's being considered for command of one of our new exploration vessels," Admiral Hayes continued. "A joint mission with hegemony species to explore the far rim territories. We'd like you to serve as his science officer if you're interested." Zarathul looked across the hall where Jake Morrison was engaged in animated conversation with a group of young Kethmoran diplomats, sharing stories of his adventures with the infectious enthusiasm that made humans such effective ambassadors. "Admiral," she said with a smile, "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." As the celebration continued around them, neither of them noticed the small group of Human Academy cadets who had been invited to observe the ceremony. They stood quietly in their dress uniforms, watching their older colleagues make history with the same calm confidence that had characterized their species since they first ventured into space. They were the next generation of humans who would patrol the galaxy's dangerous frontier. Young people who would grow up knowing that their strength existed to protect others, that their courage served peace rather than conquest, and that when someone sent out a distress call, anyone, anywhere, humans would answer. The galaxy was in good hands.